I am just going to introduce them, all the four, in the order in which they read. But once, the first poet comes on, feel free to mention anything else that I do not have on the bio. I keep my bio so short so that the poets can speak more and also have more reading time. So the first reader is going to be Ben Groner, and he is the author of the poetry collection, Dust Storms May Exist, which came out of Mudville Publishing. And it won the 2024 American Fiction Award for Religious Poetry and was named the best poetry collection of 2024 by the Nashville Scene. Yeah. Ben's work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and the Horizon Anthology and is published in Whale Road Review, Gersha, South Carolina Review, Rust and Moth, and elsewhere. Ben is also formerly a bookseller at Parnassus Books in Nashville. And if you received this in our newsletter, you will notice that there is a website where you can access more of Ben's work and get to know more about him. So feel free to click the link when you have a chance and read more about Ben. And the second reader is going to be Cathryn Hankla, who is a native of the Appalachian region of Virginia and the author of poetry collections, fiction, and memoir. Cathryn's recent titles include Immortal Star, prose poems, Not Xanadu, and Lost Places on Losing and Finding Home, in addition to Return to a Certain Region of Consciousness, which is a collection of new and selected poems. She is Professor Emerita of English and Creative Writing at Collins University and an exhibiting visual artist. Again, for more about Cathryn, feel free to click the link that's in the newsletter and you'll read more about her. Our third poet is Mary Dean Lee, and Mary Dean Lee's debut collection, Tidal, was published in April 2024. Her poems have appeared in Best Canadian Poetry 2021, Hamilton Stone Review, The Fiddlehead, Salvation South, Plowshares, and elsewhere. She grew up in Milledgeville and St. Simon's Island in Georgia and Black Mountain, North Carolina. She studied theater and literature at Duke University and Eckerd College, completed her PhD in organizational behavior at Yale University. She's also a professor emerita at McGill University and lives in Montreal. You've come a long way, welcome. And then the fourth reader is going to be Laura Newbern. And Laura Newbern is the author of Love and the Eye, selected by Claudia Rankin for the Corel Press First Book Award, and also the recipient of a Writers Award from the Rona Jaffe Foundation. Her poems have appeared in Poetry, the Southern Review, New England Review, and other journals. Her second collection of poems, A Night in the Country, was selected by Louise Gluck as a winner of the Changes Book Prize. Originally from Washington, DC, she lives in Georgia and teaches at Georgia College. So without wasting any more time, let's welcome Ben Groner.
Right. How's everyone doing? This is amazing to see all these faces for poetry. I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, like she said, I worked at Parnassus, but I've never been to Malaprops, and it was always kind of on my list of places. And I got in town about 15 minutes ago, so perfect. I'm going to read from my book. This book largely follows a 3-month road trip that I took with a friend around the country when I was in my early 20s. And I'd only known her for a few weeks as a counselor at a summer camp. We just decided to go for it. Explore the history, music, everything of this country. And one of the first days of the road trip was actually, we passed through Asheville. Has anyone been to the Feed and Seed in Fletcher, just south of here? Okay, well, we, fourth day of the night of the road trip, we got to be there. So here's a poem called Feed and Seed. Here's Echo of Thomas Wolfe. Perhaps not one of us can go home again, but who would want to? A scarf of rain clouds wrapped around the mountains as we drove to the quiet town, where we jogged to the two-story brick building on the corner of the quaint Main Street, aiming for the dark green and cream striped awnings, shielding the door from the glistening droplets as the last light drained from the sky. The long time-weathered sign, barely legible, read Fletcher Supply Co., and was bookended by vintage Coca-Cola discs the size of tabletops. An historic plaque mentioned these bricks were stacked in 1919, the same year my grandfather awoke to the world, the difference being this building was still standing. Inside, couples shuffled to bluegrass music, the fiddle piercing, the banjo frenetic, the mandolin like swollen drops of rainwater pattering on shale. I couldn't escape the sensation, who would want to, of her hands in mine as she taught me to freestyle clog. I didn't know my heel from a horseradish, but we stomped on those creaky floors till sweat soaked through our shirts, someone whistling when I spun her. When we paused for breath, an older man, hunched and mustached, leaned over and said, "Bluegrass on Fridays and Saturdays, church on Sundays." Well, that explained the pews and how places don't seem to have meaning until people bestow it. At times, we may need to pray. At others, we need to dance. What are our bodies supposed to do with space, with themselves? We whirled the night away until the band closed out their set with Hank's classic gospel hymn. Standing by the front pew, the whole room singing, "I'll fly away, oh glory." We let our shoulders lean and touch, my eyes pressed shut, my lungs belting out the tune with all their might, feeling as if some unsayable place within me had already taken flight. And I'm just going to jump all the way to New Mexico, so that cuts through a lot of space. But this felt like the first moment of the trip we'd been quiet. We were always reading books and listening to music and trying to learn about where we were going. And this moment is just crystallized because we were just laying on these sand dunes, just quiet, finally. It's called Pillars of Light, Hills of White. The rain doesn't stop us from dashing up and down the gypsum dunes, pale as moonlight. Tufts of soap tree yucca plants are quietly building a strong inner life as the sands slide around them. And when we finally rest on the crest of a hill, the San Andreas Mountains roil and rise beyond the blanketing clouds. Then a gash of gold, an opening. A tripod of ethereal beams descends like the legs of a module come from somewhere higher and farther away, come to place honey on the tips of our tongues. Silence is not akin to absence, though a sunset's infinitesimal hue change is the shift from alienation to relation, emptiness to fullness, dearth to abundance. The dunes and folds of clouds have much to teach, as do the pillars of golden light gently reaching down. So I listen, the reflecting kernels of sand, grainy and cool beneath my arms. And jump away from the road trip for a second. There's a section in the middle of poems set in South America where I had lived for 7 months before the road trip, sort of that whole year was travel. So I snuck in some South America poems. And oops. This one, I'll preface this by saying, I feel like, so I don't know about your experience with religion. I've had a very positive one, but I feel like religion and the body can sometimes have some issues. The spiritual and the physical can sometimes have qualms or difficulties. And this poem just came from that tension. It's called Sea Boarding Group. The gate attendant, excuse me. The gate attendant jokes he saved the best for last. Like in Cana, when guests tasted the best in the last hour, and 2,000 years later, we still can't fathom such a shrug of generosity. When was the last time we spoke with our neighbors down the street? And what can't a son trace back to his mother? Mine wept as I flew 2,000 miles away to sizzling Parriada, Vino Tinto, chalky canyons, freezing rapids. As we all link arms on the rim of the raft, the stranger's hair soaked and eyes sunshot, our shoulders cool to the other's touch, we are transmuted into a speeding O down the throat of the land's untapped desire. Afterwards, as we both strip and change back into dry clothes in the hostel, I have no need for a miracle, for wine to be anything but Malbec, for water to be anything but river. Dive back into the road trip. We're somewhere out west. So it's called Heat Lightning. 70 miles from Moab, she grew silent in the passenger seat as we saw the sky burgeon with dark blue thunderheads, watched them metastasize as the last light drained into a thin line of fire on the horizon. The vastness of the storm outstripped the desert flung on either side of us as we hurtled through the night, lightning veining sideways in the distance. Earlier in the road trip, we failed to stop at that chapel in Sedona, the one that juts out from the coppery butte like a fossil, proving it's possible to belong somewhere. This morning, our wordless surprise as we lay braided in the bedroom's black canyon, her face cradled in the crook of my arm. Now in this moment, I want to have something to say. Wish she would speak as storm clouds obscure every fiery freckle of stars and the synapses of lightning blossom into an orange-violet glow where the road vanishes. Perhaps it's not too much of a stretch to say the universe is a cathedral of sorts, an ocean of oxygen, carbon, energy, but mostly darkness, space, like the blind exhalation before prayer. Has anyone read the book Index of Haunted Houses by Adam Davis? It's a great collection. But after reading it, there's sort of an ominous, ghost-like tone, and that kind of led to this poem, so it's a little different than the others. It's called Inventory of Pit Stops. Grime on a concrete overpass gleams as rain spits and foams while shipping containers loiter in a vacant rail yard. A weedy gas station clings obsolete to a gravel county road like an ulster, silent as a Louisiana casino slated for demolition. Not your reality, you say, nor mine, but plenty of invisible things are true. Quirks, black holes, loneliness. Where can a man get a cup of coffee in the sibilating night? The Shanto trading post crouches against the red flesh of the earth, selling bracelets, baskets, hand-spun rugs, sodas that will jitter the nerves of the placeless. So sink into the dissolved lithium, gurgling from the Uncompahgre. Find the tranquility the water promises. Pacify yourself in the nude hot springs. Strip yourself of sanity, certainty, illusory notions. Perch like the black cat on the white F-150 at J-Bros, staring like the black and white of our politics ladled over polite conversation. This the land of barbecue ribs on red trays, soda in styrofoam cups, crucifixions of power lines carrying mycelia of light across the switchboard of America. One wire fizzes out, one fluorescent bulb above a greasy fuel pump flickers, a spark flashes, a spruce ignites, an entire landscape is aflame. Yeah. Do I have time for one more, two more? I'm not sure how we're doing. Okay, I'll read from the end of the book here. We've gone 3 months, 10,000 miles. My friend and I, we've seen so much, changed a lot, perhaps started to fall in love to the surprise of both of us, but the road trip is ending. And so this is from the last few hours of the trip. It's set at a fairy tale park, an abandoned like fairy tale summer park in Pennsylvania. So it's called Abandoned Fairy Tale. You can't miss it. Along US 30, the towering Pied Piper of Hamelin, patriotic in his red pants, blue jacket and cap, golden instrument pressed to his lips. From street to street, he piped advancing, and step for step they followed dancing. But the fairy tale park has been closed for decades. The rest of the giant statues, the goofy pink egg atop a stone wall, the whale with a knight on its tongue, the brown shoe conveniently roofed, the mushroom with a door and chimney as if someone resides in the stipe, are dingy, deteriorating, so much abandoned, left in the past. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. What to do with the 10,000 miles behind us, with the 100 or so left to go? Do we continue to merge like streams, or do we diverge, disentangle, drift apart like tides until years utterly obscure the other from view? Simple Simon went a-fishing for to catch a whale. All the water he had got was in his mother's pail. While a sack of pale scenes dangles at my side, the flayed light simmers out of the sky, and I'm back in Memphis, sequined pants sparkling on an animatronic Elvis. Back in Arizona, the dusty shoes of Japanese internment camp prisoners stacked like bones. Back in North Platte, the Buffalo Bill Cody shrine jutting from the Nebraskan flatness, wooden and phallic. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. We drive on, past cracked Schellsberg storefront windows, empty and eerie, past all those museums we perused, glimpsing ourselves reflected back in the panes of glass. Everything after tonight will be remembering a remembering. The mind recalls itself, recollecting what cannot be collected again. Old Mother Goose, when she wanted to wander, would. Do I have time for one more, or is that a good place to stop? One more? Okay. I'll just read the last poem in the book. It's called Precarious Cairns. First, it was about the sights I was seeing, then who I was seeing them with. The land itself, then the sensation of soaring far above it. First, it was about music, history, geography, regional cuisine, and lore, then simply an adventure shared with a girl, a friend. So much has been given and received, conversations, months, bodies, the precarious cairns of memory. A year from now, the slim spire of the sentinel hoodoo will succumb to eons of erosion, collapsing like beliefs that once held us intact. There will be no witnesses to its vanishing. Thousands will scour photo albums for proof it had been there, evidence they had too, as will I, finding none. I didn't record our discussion with the young Navajo guide at Antelope Canyon, the reasons for our mutual interest in one another already blurring away. I can't replicate the recipe for Adobe Deli's cheesy onion soup. I didn't jot down the bawdy tunes and clever poems amassed from descendants of settlers on spiral-bound sheaves in the Lunamenbris Museum. But a few tendrils of knowledge, of truth, have yet to be pressed into a page, a song. It has taken me so long to be inside my own life. Thank you.
That was a wonderful line to end on. Very nice. I'm Cathryn Hankla, and this is my favorite bookstore in the world. I've probably been here 5 or 6 times with different books, book of stories, and memoir, and a bunch of different books of poems, and just have a lot of gratitude for this store. And people who work here keep the books in stock. It's a wonderful place to read. In fact, I may have been here one too many times because somebody asked me where the restroom was today, and I knew exactly where it was. So this book came out in February, and I've been doing a few readings from it. It's a new and selected volume, and it contains poems from 11 previous volumes, so it's like 11 books in one, and also a selection of new poems. And I'm going to jump around in it today. It's really like a life review for me in putting this book together. I didn't really know whether or not I would have much relationship to the early work. My first book of poems came out when I was, well, anyway, 1983. So that was a long time ago. And as a result, I kept putting off rereading all of that body of work because I like to finish a book. And if I'm lucky, I publish the book and then I move on to a different experiment the next time. And going back was not something that I really was relishing to do. So I kept putting it off. And in the meantime, published 2 more books of poems that I then had to include in this book. So I made my job harder. But I did find, surprisingly, that I remembered so much about the circumstances of writing every single poem, what my life was like, where I was often, and then what, on an aesthetic sense, what I was trying to learn through that particular book and those particular poems. So there are a lot of different kinds of poems over the last 40 years. They're received forms and made up forms, nonce forms, strict syllabics, or tiny poems that are 1 line long, and then there are prose poems. So it's a lot of different experiments in poetry over the years. I'm going to read now a prose poem that is the title poem of a recent book called Immortal Stuff, reminding us of how connected we are. The physicist tells his audience we are made of immortal stuff. He's not brash enough to say we are immortal, but he does say that all our hearts are pumping around iron particles that came from the same dozen stars. Then he says that every day you slough enough of your stuff through respiration, eating, hydration, and losing solids and liquids out the other end, that it's like an arm a day goes missing. Every day you regenerate a new 7%. After a year of this, he says, even your calcium and all but 2% of your fluff exchanges. Just as 4 or 5 days from now, your exhalation in Ohio will be helping a flower bloom in Belgium. And 4 or 5 days ago, the air you are breathing left Okinawa. In other words, I'm thinking boundaries are illusory and already collapsing as 2 galaxies draw closer and closer, even if it takes billions of years, finally colliding and enveloping each other. This is why mystics tell us that whatever we exclude in the other, we condemn in ourselves. There's nothing better than breathing in, breathing out, knowing giving is receiving, and rediscovering the wisdom of Keats. Beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. Just to mix up the solemnity a little bit, this poem is called History of Splinters. It's another prose poem. There were more splinters than they had imagined, but not as many as they feared. He had a splinter, then she had several. They both had them embedded in their right hands. They were both right-handed. They would have to dig them out with their non-dominant hands if they didn't seek help. This seems to be something special, the non-dominant hand thing. There's a book about drawing that touts drawing with your non-dominant hand. Maybe if they had done more of that sort of drawing, they'd be ready for this moment. And drawing things upside down is also a big thing. I'm looking at my splinter upside down, and it still looks like a damn splinter. But if I have to dig this thing out upside down with my left hand, it's not going to be pretty. The thing about splinters is that you try to minimize the damage as you pick along with your needle. If a lot of blood oozes out, you can't grab the exposed end with your tweezers. It's about timing as much as slippage. When I was a kid, I scooted bare feet across an oak floor and came up with a giant splinter. I learned how much courage I had and how much trust, letting my aunt dig into the meat of my soul. Well, I pulled this poem out deep in the book to read today, not knowing Ben's work, but it kind of intersects. This poem is called Sandstorm, and it's about a trip west that I took when I was 17. And for some reason, the memory came flooding back after 9/11. So it's kind of a post 9/11 poem, but it's ostensibly about a sandstorm in Zion, Utah. We were only teenagers in pup tents pitched on the outskirts of Zion, Utah, along the Virgin River. In 1974, we thought the war was over. The summer night wrapped us in its blaze. Our gang lapped up with one extravagant astral gesture. Back east, never had we gazed into enlivened sky as fierce with stolen fire. Our Promethean dreams came heavy laden as sacks of stone. Uneven ground beneath our thin foam beds brought ambiguous rest as we rolled to the Pacific West in an old school bus painted blue. Something rose up from the south that night in Zion and gut punched us while we slept or didn't. Over the border in Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, exported sandstorms like these are known as Afghans. A force more fierce than wind alone sucked our structure of fragile aluminum until the forms, the dimensional spaces of our breathing collapsed, and we slashed through any opening, gasping. The sky turned its back and tumbled into our mouths like blackened ash. Arms outstretched, we tried our faulty reason on the distance and the darkness and the irrational raging wind. With all the lights stripped from the back of the sky, we tied our souvenir t-shirts into face turbans to sift oxygen from the sand that emblazoned our skin. We walked blind, battered by haze, until our eyes stung, rid of illusions, until every one of our prayers had been undone by the wilderness we had wanted to know. We were just teenagers in pup tents, intent on experience, and oh brother goddamn, how it would find us again and again, wherever we hid. I think I'll just read a couple more poems. Time goes fast when you're standing here. It goes faster anyway. All the time it goes faster and faster. This is a poem in very strict syllabics, and I've been playing around with this form I made up with 11 syllables in a line and 9 lines. I'm trying to stay off of 10. And it breaks in the middle. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it kind of has a break in the middle. So it's 6/5, 6/5 in 9 lines. And about halfway through last year, I realized that I was 65 and I was, for some reason, writing 6/5, 6/5. Anyway, kind of crazy. The way your mind works and you're oblivious to what you're doing. So this is called Belonging, BEE. Crawling the battlefield, trapped boar or bee, grips brothers, sisters, implores, eyes to eyes, shining dark bent fractals. I can't pretend to love much about these plump, slow bees, trailing sawdust to mark fraught tunneling. This carpenter bee, entranced and entrapped, crawled in, echo seeking to lay its eggs. Instead, it will join these dead. But this is my home. This boundary means we live here now. Yet Brother Buzz must be with us. And I will close off my segment here with the first poem in this book. The book starts with about 20 new poems, and then telescopes back to that first book I mentioned. This poem is almost a transcription of a dream, and I hesitate to say that, but because I was told years ago, don't ever say a poem is from a dream, because they're all dreams, and it's boring to say that. But anyway, this is a poem from a dream. Skydiving with Aunt Margaret. This is the twin of the other aunt that got the splinter out of my foot. She was Marjorie. This is Margaret. Okay. They helped raise me along with my mom. We were related again, the dead and the mostly living. Sliding layers of cakey atmosphere, parachutes blooming side by side. Our conversation as improbable as saying to a mountain, move, and it's moving. At a certain point, with ground swelling beneath us, we had to separate and sail free. Our riggings might entangle us. You cascaded fast. I saw you touch and roll, black and white dress, a tablecloth whipping down the green hillside. Your alligator pumps did not fly off. I knew you were a goner, but you died years ago. From this perspective, as I fall too, the ground will be hard, of course, but sky is what covers us. Thank you. Your water? You've got another one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's okay.
Thank you for your poems and all your readings. I'm Mary Dean Lee, and I grew up in Georgia and North Carolina, but I've been living in Montreal a very long time, so I'm far from home, but very privileged to be here. And I want to thank Mildred for curating and Malaprops for having us, and all of you for being here to listen. When I give readings, I like to memorize some and read others. So don't get thrown by that. And if I forget something, the book is right here, so I don't get flustered by that. I'd like to start with a poem that comes from the very first Earth Day ever held in Philadelphia, where I happened to be living with my first husband, Jim. Earth Day. After the protest, 2 policemen on horseback closing the park approached me and Vita and offered us rides home. Sheepish but game, we grabbed hold of their leather and galloped across field and hill of Fairmount Park. Gasped and smiling, we waved goodbye. Jim was waiting at the restaurant. I wanted to tell him there's no heat in his hands, his mouth, his tongue when we're in bed. Instead, I told him Vita had just left her husband and 2 children, that we had ridden the night sky on horseback through the park. The day Vita moved out, she gave me her grandmother's porcelain pitcher. I fill it each May, lilac branches with lavender clusters, and think about her waking up to her new life. You have to grab the berry by its small leaves, she said, dip it into sugar and cream, then pop it quickly in your mouth. The next poem is from a family gathering recent summer in the Black Mountain area. And it's called Summer Night in the Smokies.
Summer night in the Smokies. In the scant light and shadows, I wind my way to a stone house hugging the mountainside and a niece's baby, feeling the low ache of family. Rip in the tapestry, young mother run amok. As the tree frogs swell, builds green upon green upon green, I rise, babe in arms, top of the tulip tree to find where these crooners are tucked in. Elbows and branches, woodpecker holes, leaf them edges, and how they make their deafening chorus that surges through arms and chest, thrums my brain. Legs against armpits, exhale from nostrils, tongues tickling vocal folds. This babe and I find a place to curl up on a branch for the night, to inhale, to inhabit the soothing tones, slow crescendo, the surround of sound in our veins. The next two poems are about my brother Bill. When I was 19 and he was 17, he was in a car crash and he died 2 years later of his injuries. And I feel very privileged today that two of my brother's best friends from way back then are here. The first poem is called Postcard from My Brother. Postcard from My Brother. Dear sis, I think of you now and then in the void I inhabit. Still 19. Nothing to smell here. No ripples on water. No endings. No playfulness. No scenes. And I think about her too, the one I met that summer, holding her hand by the rushing creek. The letters that made me yearn to drive all night to see her again. I don't remember nodding off, only silence. Sis, she's here now, middle-aged, timid, bird-like, still radiating that delicate beauty from her cheekbones. And you, my conscience, my rock, my civil rights mover, good daughter. What pain, what solace has come your way in the land of beginnings? I want to see you. And the second poem is called Higher and Higher, Higher and Higher. Bill enters high school at 12, 2 grades ahead, opens a tennis shop, stringing and selling rackets, shoes, balls. Bill hits ace serves, is the top-ranked junior in the Southeast, known as the comeback kid, pulling upsets from 06, 05. Bill learns from dad how to invest in the stock market, is tracked by the IRS, curious about Lee's tennis shop at a residential address. Bill dazzles at the piano, all technique, no sentiment, startles the hall with crisp Bach played on the fast side. Bill excels in prep school, sent to recalibrate age and grade, unfazed by a bigger pond in the classroom, on the courts, graduates magna cum. Bill shifts focus in college from tennis and good grades to girls, dating, keeps notes in his journal on how to be a good conversationalist. Bill soars at an invite to be Honey's escort for a Deb ball in New Year's Eve in New York. But Dad won't pay for a trip, middle of Christmas break. Bill convinces his friend Ben to team up after exams, drive a Cadillac, New York to Miami for big cash so he can buy his own ticket. Bill borrows a friend's car in St. Pete for the last lap in tandem on the Tamiami, then returning after the drop-off to all head home to Georgia. Bill arrives with Ben after the 20-hour driving marathon, checks out a campus party, but can't find his summer fling Gail, crashes on a sofa. Bill pulls the Corvair onto the highway, Ben and Caddy in his rear view, wings resting on his shoulders, breeze in the balmy air, window cracked. Bill starts to nod off, eyelids heavy, turns on the radio. The wheels veer off onto a disappearing shoulder, small bridge ahead. Car hits bridge abutment, youth critically injured, Southwest Florida News, December 18, 1964. The next poem is from a September in Southern Ontario. Joe and I spend a lot of time at a rustic cabin on a river bay. Joe is my current husband. And the poem is titled Season, Season. A rolling rustle from the meadow forest. A rolling rustle from the meadow forest. A fawn in flight bursts out. Wolf at its hind, and I smell the musky wind as horizontal torso and long gray legs veer off toward Joe. And I am standing with my nightshirt open, coffee grounds still in their basket, too late to shout, "Take me." At night, the wolf comes back, finding me in a hollow among dry leaves. I wake and feel Joe's loins along my back, and I wolf whisper, "Quiet, he's asleep." Outside, I clamber on his back, and he takes me to a smoker of wolves, howling and carrying on. I keep step, circling, grab a bone to suck clean alongside the rest, and then race back home, leaving a deer tail on the porch for Joe before climbing back in bed. This next poem it's about the ache of being a parent, the ache of being a parent. And it's called Tour of My Heart. The upper right chamber is reserved for my daughter, floating out the window into black night, me holding her by the ankle, my ears cocked for sirens, flashing lights. The upper left holds my feisty son, watching, waiting, fists ready to strike what is invisible, lunge at loneliness. At the bottom lies my husband. Arms and legs spread across both chambers, pumping fresh blood in and out of me. It's not enough. And my last poem is called 2040, as in this is 2025, 2040. I'll likely be expired by then. Transformed maybe into a will-o'-the-wisp floating in a marsh by the sea. I wonder how I'll go, alone or not. In a car? By drowning. Fall off a cliff? Slowly rot from some common pox that preys on elderly Goth. Or will I curl up like a cat, purring at my mother's feet as she rocks beside some heavenly fire? Maybe I'll pass my last years with my daughter, planting lupins in the valleys and at the side of roads. And then I will paint them. I will take up square dancing, easy steps, coaxing me along. For an Alaman left, swing your partner. Old codger, grabbing me by the waist, steadying my crumbling knees and flat feet. As I commune with the moon, sail off in my hammock to become a loon's mate in the bay. Joe will hear me and understand. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura. Thank you, Mildred. Thank you, Malaprop, for having us. I spent some of the best days of my life down the road in Swannanoa as a student and then briefly as a faculty member at Warren Wilson. So it means a lot to me to be here. It's just good. Also, thank you, fellow poets. It's an honor to read in such wonderful company, seriously. And thank you for coming out in the somewhat threatening weather to listen to poems. I'm going to begin with a poem by somebody else. This is A.R. Ammons, who I believe was originally from North Carolina. And it's just from the book that I've been reading for the last couple of weeks. This is from the 80s. It's called A Coast of Trees, and it's really good. So I recommend it. And this is a very short poem with very short lines, and it's called Wiring. Wiring. Radiance comes from on high and, staying, sends down silk lines to the flopping marionette, me. But love comes from under the ruins and sends the lumber up limber into leaf that touches so high it nearly puts out the radiance. So I think I have time to read 5 poems. And can you guys hear me okay in the back? Okay. Better? A little bit? Okay, I'll try to project. I'm not very good at that. I'm gonna begin with a recent-ish poem, and then without any ado, I'm gonna transition and read 4 poems from this book, A Night in the Country. And the recent-ish poem that I'll start with is a hustle. If you're not familiar, that's a originally Persian form. It's a poem in couplets. If you don't know what one is, you'll know when I've finished reading it. It's in couplets, and each couplet features a repeating phrase, kind of like a chime. I like writing them because they seem to ask usually for a long line, which is not something that comes very naturally to me. So this is called In March. You can work on a hustle for a long time. I began working on this in the spring of 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine again. In March, the Russian army advances, red arrows everywhere. The snow flies. What century is it? Here, daffodils bloom. There, the snow flies. In summer, I sat at the table and stared at the feeder covered with birds. I do think that time is an ocean and that always, somewhere, the snow flies. At the reading, you whispered into my ear, too many words. I wanted to die with laughter. I held very still, so did you. Oh, but we were bare, the snow flies. What is it to love forever? A friend, a lover, a mother, a teacher who took to you, who looked in your eyes and said something like, I am despair, the snow flies. In spring, we stepped into the Orthodox church, shining with sprays and eggs. The sprays were of willow, we in our black coats, 2 prayers, the snow flies. Roses, yellow carnations, flowers all over my friend's mother's grave. An old woman's voice filled the cathedral in Boston, wavering as the snow flies. In the fairy tale, the snow flies. In the tattered novel, on stage at the Met, in La Boheme, Mimi turns blue and dies, and nobody cares. The snow flies. The grandfather clock was carefully packed up and moved 4 hours south. In its panel, a circular painting, geese against sky. I stare, and snow flies. Remember when we were children, capturing flags, carving kingdoms into the rootlands of trees? The world was dirty and new. Time, a bright air, the snow flies. Ashes. In the waiting room, I noticed my doctor's a painter, his name scrawled in the corner of a canvas depicting 2 mountains, a country church, and a streaked sky. And the painting is not on a wall, but on an easel thrust out like a hip into the room at hip level. And on the TV overhead, a woman who wants to be a millionaire, trying to decide whether the heaven above company is in the business of placing a loved one's ashes inside a firework or inside a stuffed animal. C or B, she cannot decide. She cannot decide, and the wait is interminable. She wants it to be B, stuffed animal. Minutes and minutes go by as she twists herself in her striped shirt and her denim jacket into one answer and then the other, smiling, grimacing, smiling again. She wants that sweetness, maybe, even more than the money. This is my country. My doctor has painted the sky over his church a daring devotional red, and I imagine my mother, or maybe my beautiful red-headed sister, blazing across it, a starry final act. And by then, at last, the woman contestant has it. Reluctantly, see, she says, final answer. To which the host, creating suspense, says, as slowly as possible, you were all over the place, but you thought it through. And you, my dear, yes, you came through. Black Forest. Sometimes my mind goes back to certain things, like everyone's, like to the woman who asked me, what keeps you awake at night? She wanted a writerly, magical answer. A black forest, a shining maid walking through it. The woman, she was a guest, a visiting artist. I was a guest to her visitingness, polite guest at an affable table. My neck, I said, meaning pain of the basest physical kind, meaning also sadness and worry, though I didn't say so. I'd done enough. I'd said the neck thing as if I were snapping a chicken for supper. The woman smiled through it, a pro. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, pushing the shining maid into a closet and shutting the door in a hushed and magical way. I wanted to bind her with rope. I wanted to watch her struggle, if just for a minute. The mind goes back, the heart goes with it, the forest whirls all around. Instead, I was kind to her husband, whose life had had something to do with flight. He was quiet, the husband, like someone whose part in the world was done. He seemed to expect no one. He was the husband. He was like light on the leaves of night. Just have a couple more. I'm going to read the title poem of A Night in the Country. I live in middle, somewhat rural Georgia, and this poem is very deeply set there. So, A Night in the Country. Last night, mild September, my friend of 20 years strung lights in a forest of cedars. Not quite a forest, a gathering of trees close to the road, behind a historic cabin, and only a stone's throw from his mother's house. His mother who died 1 year ago, thus the lights, neighbors, family, friends, and even a two-man band under the trees. Prayer, then food. The oldest among us sat themselves down at the tables when they were told. And the rest of us, younger but not so young anymore, stood in the shadows, drinking and talking, drinking from wine glasses there in the mild wood, feeling for the first time the weight of the dark, the way night weighs and falls. It is nice to have glasses and silver and china plates in the open, the middle of nowhere, that far out in the country. Silvery moths the size of hands landed upon us. True dark, and the band struck up, and one of the oldest men jumped up and danced a jig, and just before doing it screamed, "I can dance!" And my friend's partner of 10 years or so, I hadn't seen them since the funeral, said, sometimes out here, I'm afraid. Think, he said, of the Quakers who settled this place. A church and the cabin are all that remain. Their cattle, he said, their cattle were their lives, and they had no lights. This under the strung lights toward the end of the night, the old man and the relatives having by then shuffled off to their cars and home to bed. Scary, he said, lifting his graying head to the so many moons on their invisible strings. The two-man band had gone too. It seems to me now that they bowed their heads as they walked away. And I did. I thought of the Quakers there in their gray frocks, walking the worn paths still to be seen under the cedars, navigating the monstrous dark, trunk by trunk. Oh, they had lanterns and candles, but still. And now my friend, still bereaved, stumbling, exhausted, tipping to sleep and gone white in the face. He looks like his mother, who lived out in that country alone, who kept goats in a low pen close to the house. They must have sometimes cried in the night. She must have risen, turned on the light, remembering where the telephone was, a hand on the wall. Those lights, they seemed to grow brighter, tree to tree. And the later, the darker it got, the more there were Quakers, gray girls and boys and mothers and fathers moving. All they wanted was family, peace. And from that place, they were driven away. And I'll close with another hustle. This one, actually somebody, a very early reviewer of this book let everyone know that he had no use for hustles at all, which is interesting, but I do, clearly so. This one springs from a 15th century painting by Giovanni Bellini called The Ecstasy of St. Francis. It's also kind of popularly known as St. Francis in the Desert. And it's housed at the Frick Collection in New York. I think that my love for this painting kind of permeates this book. It's light and shadow and animals. It's really where the book began. So, hustle. In Bellini's sweet painting, St. Francis looks out on the country. Shoes off, open-mouthed, he's lost to the light of the country. Landscape, desert, everything glows, everything turns to a rose in the heart of the country. What burning bush wouldn't burn in so much placidity? A far tower, some sheep, what you find in that part of the country. God's still alive, say the animals. Look to our double lanterns, our eyes in the night in the country. St. Francis leans back as on an invisible bluff of air, breath of the moon and the sun. And to his right, there's a donkey. The painting wound up in New York in the velvety living room of an old man. Fifth Avenue carriages, snow and sleet, pink fire in a firelit country. I pray to St. Francis when I have to pray, because he seems kind and astonished and stricken by everything, true saint of the country. Even the laurel tree tasseled with dawn, leans into the frame. It leans to the man in the country, the art, the humility. Thank you.
Just one more round of appreciation. Thank you so much, Laura Newbern, and thank you so much, Mary Dean Lee. Thank you so much, Cathryn Hankla, and thank you so much, Ben Groner. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, and I hope to see you again on May 4th when we have another group of poets reading. And for now, feel free to head to the counter if you would like to buy some of the books. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.